Okay. I hope everyone can hear me who's online. Looks like we have about 15 or so folks joining us, as well as the folks in the room. So welcome, everyone. My name is Rebecca Goodman. I'm the director of the Africa Biodiversity Collaborative Group. I'm just going to give a very quick overview of ABCG in, I think, 5 to 7 slides before I hand it off to our featured speaker today. The presentation will be about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a 30-minute Q&A afterwards. So if you can keep your burning questions until then, I think there'll be a lively discussion. So just in a few words, the Africa Biodiversity Collaborative Group is a partnership of 7 institutions. I'm going to rattle them off. It's the African Wildlife Foundation, who are our hosts today, Conservation International, the Jane Goodall Institute, the Nature Conservancy, the Wildlife Conservation Society, the World Resources Institute, and the World Wildlife Fund. I have to count them on my fingers so I don't forget anybody. Together, these organizations are working together to address large-scale and complex challenges that are facing the continent that really require a concerted effort and bringing together the resources across that continuum to address the challenges. So here they are. It's easier maybe to recognize their logos. So our purpose is really to increase our collective conservation impact across Africa, and we do that by advancing understanding of those critical challenges and their solutions, and by producing practical tools and knowledge that can be employed by the members and more broadly to elevate practice across the continent. And so the approach looks something like this. We're working with partner institutions on the ground through our members to identify common challenges and knowledge gaps, and then developing new knowledge products to help plug those gaps, piloting those in the field across a variety of geographies, and we cover quite an expanse between all the 7 organizations and their field programming. And then applying lessons and tools to increase the evidence base for those best practices, and then disseminating those practices more broadly. So currently, we're kind of divided into 2 different thematic areas. Conservation planning, which includes working groups on land use management, the global climate adaptation, looking at the indirect impacts of human responses on biodiversity through behaviors, and community-based forestry management. And then we have an area called Global Health Linkages to Biodiversity Conservation, which is looking specifically at freshwater conservation and WASH, and population health and environment. We also have a core pillar in gender integration, which kind of creates a foundation throughout, but we're doing some specific work in that area within the global health sector. That's all I'm going to say for now, so please check us out online. There's a plethora of resources spanning about 20 years now. We also have a social media presence, and then the best way to find out about events like these and receive, the knowledge products when they come out is to sign up for the listserv. So I imagine maybe you have, since you all found us here today. Yeah, please do that, and then you can always contact me. I'm based here in DC, and I have a counterpart who's based in Nairobi, so if you're ever passing through, you can reach out to her. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric Koppinger with AWF, who's going to introduce Sudi today.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Webele Kwija. Welcome, everyone. I'm Eric. I'm on the ABCG steering committee as AWF's representative, and I lead our engagement with governments globally within AWF. But really, my role here is just to introduce Sudi, because I'm sure you'd rather hear from him. So Sudi has a master's in science in forestry and rural development, as well as a graduate diploma in institutional management. Obviously, he's leading our country programs in Uganda. We've been lucky enough to bring him on, but after a career that started off as an agronomist with the Uganda Tea Growers Cooperation, and then later with district government in Jinja in western Uganda. And then he spent 14 years with USAID in their environment division and the mission there in Uganda. in the last 7 years as the environment team lead in USAID Uganda. And then in between USAID and AWF, he was a managing director of ABEAT Associates Limited, a private agribusiness and forestry enterprise development firm in Uganda. So we're pretty excited to have him here, even though I know he's not happy about the weather. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to share.
Thank you, Eric, and good morning. I've been here for 2 weeks, but I still get confused whether it's morning or afternoon. My clock is still confused, and for the temperature, thanks to Eric, just decided to bundle me in here when it's cold. I'm just looking forward to the day when I leave. Incidentally, I have about 15 hours to leave the country, but I feel like if it would just reduce to about 1 hour, and I So anyway, as I said, I'm Sudi Bamulesewa, Country Director for African Wildlife Foundation. I will not go into the other details here as ably described who I am. This morning I'll be sharing with you the overview of biodiversity, the way we look at it as AWF. What I'm talking about is the way we look at biodiversity in Uganda as AWF. Some of it might be different, you might be having a different perspective, but yeah, that's how we look at biodiversity in Uganda.
That clicker's here.
Oh,
sorry.
so
Yeah,
I was probably supposed to
just
go
move
on
forward.
that. You do
The forward button. The right
this
one.
one. Thank you.
Yep. How many of you have been to Uganda?
Tough crowd.
I hope the 15 that are online, maybe some of them. Well, this is, then I should have done a map of Africa, then showed where Uganda is. This doesn't sound good. Yeah, so this is a map of Uganda. Uganda is sitting at the equator, if you look at the map of Africa, and then somewhere at the center, that's where you find Uganda. And when I talk about the climate here, the cold here, you understand where I'm coming from. We are at the equator. All year round, our temperatures are high. When we are at 15 degrees Celsius, which is about 50, 60 degrees Celsius, that's when it's very cold in Uganda. So 60 degrees is very cold. I mean, we are putting on layers. So this is Uganda. Uganda is well endowed with natural resources. We have a lot of wildlife. I'll be talking about that in the next slides. But we have 10 national parks, and we have over 20 forest reserves. Then we have a couple of wildlife reserves. So when you look at the map of Uganda, pink for the ladies who are here can tell me those colors. That pink, Mikaela. We have Kidepo, we have Machon Falls, we have Queen Elizabeth, we have the Virungas down in Mugahinga, which is part of the Virunga landscape. All that's in the pink are the national parks. Then we have those dotted green parts. Those are the forest reserves that we have in the country. So, what's the conservation value for in Uganda? As I said, we are among the top 10 countries worldwide in terms of animal and plant diversity, especially the mammalian species. You get in there, you can Google, you'll find a lot of information about the mammalian species that we have, a lot of wildlife that is within within the country, both within the parks, protected areas, as we call it, that's government-owned land, and outside the protected areas. We are host to approximately 345 species of the mammals, and we are proud to own 39% of the mammals in Africa. Then we host more than half of the world's mountain gorillas. I talked about the Mugahinga Bwindi, that area. Below we have Rwanda, and then we have DRC, that area that has mountain gorillas. Population is about 800, 900. The We just completed the census. Results are not yet out, but we are sure that we have almost half of that population in Uganda. And then Chibale, Eric worked there when he had just completed college, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you noticed the language he greeted us with when he was just introducing me. That is the local language, Agandi. So that area is very beautiful. If you come to Uganda, if you cannot go to Kidepo, which is far off, if you can't go to the Bwindi Mugahinga, then you should miss Chibale because it's equally beautiful. You'll see the chimps, We have, as I said, Chibale is beautiful with about 12 species of primates with the highest density. You go in there, unless you are jinxed, you not miss to see some of the primates. Uganda is a paradise for birds. For those of you who enjoy birding, Uganda is the destination. We have other areas of biodiversity and ecological importance outside the protected areas, and I will be talking about this later. It's a challenge for those of us who are in conservation. We have these areas that are extremely rich in biodiversity, but then we do not have control. Overall, the government does not have control, and even the conservation civil society organizations don't have control. This is land that belongs to communities, land that belongs to individuals, but then it's having this very rich biodiversity. So that's the challenge that we'll be talking about later. Talking about challenges, I've talked about the wealth of resources that we have in the country, the biodiversity, the wildlife, the wildlands. But with that resource, we also have human beings that would want to survive. Number one challenge in the country right now, it's human-wildlife conflict. We have individuals, we have people that are living adjacent to these protected areas. We have people that are living with the wildlife outside protected areas. They need to survive. I just talk about two issues that are at play here. People are growing crops for survival, for food and for cash. They want land. But then we have wildlife that is either within their area or that is in the parks that would also want to look for food within these areas. So you have the herbivores, the elephants, the hippos. They would want to come and forage on the crops. So there is destruction of crops by wildlife, and it goes on in all the parks, whether Chidepo, whether in Queen Elizabeth, Machon, all over the place. You have wildlife getting into the communities, looking for food. And then you have the cannibals that are also looking out for food, killing livestock. Then you flip it and look at the other side, the other way. You have these individuals that are in the communities. They don't have sufficient land. They don't have enough food. They also want to go into the park, either look for fuel wood, look for animal protein, or they are looking for water for their domestic animals. So when you look at that scenario, then you are going to come up with conflict. And this is the human wildlife conflict we are talking about. And it's a lot. It's been documented that in the last 10 years, we have had cases of about 13,000 human wildlife cases. Some of these are fatal. So it is a big issue. It's a big challenge in the country. Government is trying to address it. Civil society, AWF, WCS, GHI, all these institutions are trying to help government of Uganda mitigate the human wildlife conflict, but it's a big issue, and we don't have a solution that we can just sit in a room and come up with a solution. Every landscape that you go to, you just have to sit down with the people and come up with kind of a way to resolve some of these issues. The other challenge that we have in the country is the increasing human population. We are told our population growth is about 3.3%, which is statistically we are told it's one of the highest in the world. That coupled with the fertility rate of our mothers and sisters, which is at about 6 children per woman, which is quite high. Then the other is the high poverty levels. These are official figures, 27.7%. But when you get into the country, you may want to think that poverty level is probably about 40%. If I may go with these figures, 27.7% of the people are living under $1 a day. So if you have this kind of situation, and then you have resources, you can just imagine an area like Machon Falls with a population of, say, I'm just putting up a figure, say 1 million people. Out of 1 million, you have 270,000 individuals living under $1 a day, but they have this wildlife, that they can sell, or they can kill and sell. Or if somebody comes, some of these guys who are involved in illegal wildlife trade, say, well, I give you $100, you put down an elephant. Somebody will easily do that because they are poor, they don't have alternative sources of income. So it's a challenge, and it has a direct impact on wildlife and wildlife management. Then the other challenge is industrialization and oil discovery in the country. Good news, bad news. The good news is that the country is saying, our president, politicians are saying, the only way we can improve our economy, the only way we can pull people out of poverty is by industrializing. Fair enough. But then you are promoting industrialization at what expense? You need to convert land to be able to industrialize. Government is saying we are willing to give land to people that are bringing in dollars to invest in industrialization. Government does not own land. Rather, government owns land, but the land that it owns, most of it is what we are calling protected areas. So what is happening is government is looking for forested areas and giving it away to investors. And then the second part of this plate is the oil discovery. Again, good news, bad news. Good news in that with oil, once we get in production, government will be bringing in dollars. Probably will be getting fewer people into the bracket of the high poverty levels. The bad news is where the oil has been discovered so much into the Albertan Graben, which is this area here. This area here. Discovery of oil has happened in this Albertan Graben. It's the Albertan Rift, and it's the area. When I talk about the high biodiversity, that's the area that has probably 67% of our biodiversity in the country, and that's the area that we have oil. Big challenge. You will not tell government that forget about oil because we want to conserve wildlife. But then we can also we can tell government that forget about oil, conserve wildlife. But also government will not tell us that forget about wildlife, we want oil. There must be a balance, and that's where we all come in. How do we strike a balance? How do we have oil but with minimal impact to our wildlife? In my presentation, I've talked about much of this. These are the threats and drivers that we have identified as a country, and it's by and large it is It's across almost the entire Africa. We have poaching. It's not news. Significant in national parks, and the dispersal and the corridors. Those areas that I talked about, areas that have where we have populations close to the parks, but they are not gazetted as parks. Where you see the red here is where you have a strong correlation between the threat and the conservation target. Up there, the conservation target for AWF and many of the institutions is that we have the national parks for landscapes, the dispersal area for forest reserves, and then the species. I mean, those the elephant, lions, chimps, giraffe, and the mountain gorilla. So with the poaching, it is so significant in the national parks and the dispersal and corridor areas. A lot of poaching. Most of the poaching in Uganda is mainly for bushmeat. Then we have the human-wildlife conflict. I talked about this earlier. Again, it's significant in the national parks, the dispersal areas, and here it is both conflict because of looking for conflict over water resources, pasture, and then retaliatory killings, where people would kill, say, lions. I mean, we lost 8 to 9 lions last year, I think, or this year, as a result of retaliatory killings. A lion went out and killed a goat in a community, and in return, the community decided to poison 8, 9 lions in Queen Elizabeth. So we have that in national parks and the corridors. And the species concerned are the elephants, where the elephants go in and they are destroying crops. Sometimes it's fatal. They go in and in the process also kill children and even adults. And then the lions. Habitat loss is another big loss. I've talked about industrialization. We are losing habitat because of industrialization. We are losing habitat because of agriculture expansion. Our agriculture practices are still rudimentary. We don't use a lot of fertilizer. So if a family uses a plot of land for 5 years, fertility will go down. So what they do next is now to move from one area, look for another virgin area. In most cases, for those that live close to forested areas or even in parks, the next candidate would be parks and forest reserves. And yeah, so this is national parks, dispersal areas, forest and forest reserves. Then the elephant here, we are talking of habitat loss. We are seeing that the elephants, they move long distances. Most of the areas where we have elephants, they used to move from one park to another, and between those 2 parks, we had corridors. Like Machon and then East Madi. These are distant places, but there used to be a corridor. But now, what was a corridor is now settlement. So the movement of elephants is curtailed. But because they have this memory, such as I've told us that even if it happened 30, 40 years ago, elephants still have this in their genes. They still believe that they have this corridor, they have to move in. And that continues to bring conflict that I talked about earlier. Illegal wildlife trade. What is significant here is the elephant. I want to point out that we don't have a lot of cases in Uganda where we have elephant loss due to illegal wildlife trade. A lot of the illegal wildlife trade in the country is as a result of transit. We have material coming in from Sudan and DRC. But again, this is elephant ivory. Natural resource extraction as a threat. I talked about oil discovery. It's a big threat. It's also in the dispersal areas and the national parks. Then the last 2, the charcoal production and illegal logging, is much more into the forest reserves. And the reason this threat is mainly because of, the country, 78% wood fuel. So it's either as wood or charcoal. So there's a lot of conversion of forested areas to charcoal and firewood. And then illegal logging, because of the industrialization, because of the urbanization, we are experiencing a lot of illegal logging, and species like chimpanzees are suffering because of conversion of their habitat due to illegal logging. There's an area called Budongo, which is a forest reserve. Significant conflict between the population there and chimpanzee is increasing by the day, which I was just reading yesterday in our local newspapers. I think 2 days ago, a chimpanzee killed a child. I mean, the mother was cultivating and left the child unattended to, and then the chimp came and So that's how bad it is. But these are chimps that used to live in their forested area, but now it has been cleared, and they also want to survive. It's not good to talk about challenges alone. There are always opportunities, and that's what gives us smiles. In the country, we have a new Wildlife Act 2019. It was assented to by our president around July, August, I think. Yeah, July, August, which replacing the one that had been put in place in 1996 at the time of forming Uganda Wildlife Authority. The act is almost the same, but there are a few things that have been changed, and those are the things that, for us as AWF, we would like to support government in achieving, but they are also speaking to what we are working on as AWF. So basically giving us an enabling environment for us to be able to implement our activities. The four that we pull out of this act, and that even government, even the Uganda Wildlife Authority, the Ministry of Tourism, is looking at is, number one is the deterrent sentencing. In the previous act, somebody would commit a wildlife crime, they are taken to the courts of law, and they are just given a sentence can even be given a sentence as small as $2, and somebody will walk away. In the act, if you are involved in a wildlife offense, which is either related to a species that is extinct in the wild, or a species that is endangered, you can be sentenced, can have life sentence, or a fine of $5 million or both. So it is deterrent. The unfortunate part of this part of the act, this clause here is that it leaves the judicial officer to determine, because it's a maximum. So somebody can still say, well, yeah, according to what you are saying, we are sentencing you to $10. So what Uganda Wildlife Authority has asked, and the government, and as AWF, we are looking at the way we are going to support government, is to develop regulations that would enable government actualize this clause. I mean, all of them. But right now, for this one, we want to help government of Uganda to formulate regulations such that if somebody is found with having killed, say, an elephant, what would be the minimum? Such that we can put in a minimum, we can guide the courts of law to be able to have a minimum that is also deterrent. Otherwise, it is still, much as at least we achieved that maximum, we still need to work on something that's reasonable. Compensation, in the previous act, if one lost crops due to wildlife raids, or somebody lost a child, or somebody lost livestock, the best that government would do, guideline authority would do, is just to commiserate with that person, maybe just provide, if a person is lost, maybe buy a coffin and that's it. In the new act, many of the stakeholders try to resist this, but somehow it found its way in the act. Why a number of stakeholders were resisting it? Because Kenya has the same clause in their act, and they are suffering. I mean, they have a huge bill for compensation, and managing it is also difficult. How do you determine whether somebody has actually lost a certain amount of acres of crop? But then somehow it got into the act. It's good. Some of us who work with the communities, it will help us, work with the community and see how we can mitigate some of the issues. But then again, we need to help government of Uganda come up with the regulation to be able to actualize this compensation, put in guidelines that will enable the compensation to be carried out. The other is revenue sharing. This is not new, it has been in the act, or the act. What is new here is that the revenue sharing is going to be ring-fenced. In the previous act and in this act, 20% of the collection goes to the communities that are adjacent to the protected areas. The difference here in this particular act is that when this money is now moved to the communities, it will be ring-fenced. The community has to come up with a plan. Like this year, we are getting X amount of dollars. We'll be doing A, B, C, D, and then Uganda Life Authority approves that plan, and then the money is used. Before, it was just 20%. At every end of year, UWA would just get checks, give it to the local government, and then they would use the money as and how they want it. Many of you are aware that our systems are not as efficient as the systems here. So when this money gets into the local government, oftentimes out of X amount of dollars, probably 0.1% would get down to the communities. So it wasn't serving the purpose. With this new act, at least we are going to have the ring fencing. And again, for those of us who are in these communities, working with these communities, we'll be able to guide them, tell them that, this year, last year you did a school. This year, how about if you worked on water, So that's what that's the beauty with this. And then wildlife ranching. We, as AWF, we are working on establishing conservancies. Before this act, the act wasn't explicit, but now we are able to support conservancies. We are able to get into communities. We are able to get to private sector and tell them, you can come to Uganda, apply for a license, and carry on with wildlife ranching. As AWF, we are setting up 3 conservancies in the country, and now with this enabling law, we'll be able to roll out either more conservancies or even develop those ones that we have. The other opportunity is moving out from the Wildlife Act is the opportunity is that we are increasing our wildlife. As I said earlier, there was like a system that was carried out a few months after last year. They are computing the figures. We don't have the up-to-date figures, but all indications are showing that we have our numbers increasing. Apart from the lions, that looks like the numbers not increasing. Then we have the other opportunity of increased potential for tourism. Over the last couple of years, probably 5-7 years, our tourist numbers has more than doubled. We were at about 1 million, now we are almost getting 2 million. And then also tourism is now the number 1 forex earner in the country, taking over from coffee. And as conservation institutions, we want to ride on that opportunity. Continue telling government, continue telling stakeholders that tourism is the thing to support, and because our tourism, a big percentage of our tourism is world-based tourism. We have culture, we have business tourism, but the bulk of our tourism is wildlife-based tourism. So we want to use that opportunity to be able to engage those interested to support wildlife management. Then we have a very big group, the youth in the country. If I remember the figures, I think 60% of our population are under 35 years of age. Opportunity is that we have these young people that will be able to work. They are not like the Sudis of this world who are old. They will be able to come here in this weather, and they can even walk, without shirts. But then there is the other side. The youth, many of them are not educated, and those that are educated don't have jobs. So it's a double-edged sword. It's an opportunity. We have this big youth group that can be used to do economic activities, but then they don't have opportunities. They are not educated, and actually that is one of the reasons why, as AWF, we are supporting conservation schools. We are also trying to bring a big cadre of individuals into conservation, such that we are going to support our efforts. Yeah, AWS work in Uganda. I've just in the previous slides I talked about some of the figures, but maybe I just run through. This is our vision: to ensure that wildlife thrive in a modern Africa. This was this wording here was it's so spark for those who were part of it. Maybe they were part of coining this one, because remember I talked about industrialization, urbanization. This is what happened in Africa, and we cannot run away from it. But at the same time, we need to maintain wildlife. So as we modernize Africa, we also have to know that we have to maintain our heritage. So whoever coined this one, it's a good one. Our approach is holistic. We don't do stovepiping, and that's why we have been successful in many of the landscapes. If we are looking at species, we also look at the land where those species live. Then we look at the community, because the communities are living together with the wildlife, or they are close to where wildlife lives. And then I talked about the youth. If you have youth that are not educated, then your efforts are likely not to result into anything good. And then finally, I spent quite some time talking about the Act. We need to bring in policy and advocacy. So whatever we are doing, we try as much as possible to get all those components together. Otherwise, if you work on one and leave the other, just the high that you are likely to lose the battle. A few points about what we are working on. I have talked about our support to building capacity in government of Uganda institutions. We work with Uganda Wildlife Authority. We work with the National Forest Authority. We work with the Uganda Tourism Board. These are government of Uganda institutions. I've talked a lot about Uganda Wildlife Authority. National Forest Authority, as AWF right now, we are helping NFA open boundaries. I talked about habitat loss. There's a lot of encroachment that has gone on our forest reserves. And because this has happened over years, boundaries were not clear. Even government did not know exactly where the forest boundaries are, because we found in some cases where we go open boundaries, almost the community has gone into the forest area by almost like 2-3 kilometers. So we are helping government of Uganda, National Forest Authority, open boundaries in selected forest reserves. Then UTB, I've talked about tourism. We want to use tourism as an entry point to conservation. Yeah, tourism development, I've talked about that. We are supporting Uganda Wildlife Authority to establish public-private partnerships in parks. Most of the lodges that we have in the parks are privately owned, but many of them are not high-end. They are the mid to low level. and many of them, they do not have a proper arrangement where government is benefiting and the private sector is benefiting. And then also the private sector understanding that by investing in a park, you have to do some kind of support to conservation. So we are helping the Wildlife Authority to set up these public-private partnerships in selected protected areas for purposes of A, increasing pet nights in the parks, high end, and then B, bringing in private capital that would eventually support conservation. Then finally, we are supporting the communities. I talked about this, adjacent protected areas. We've set up, we are setting up conservancies, and the purpose of these conservancies is for people to appreciate the importance of wildlife, for them to be able to benefit from the existence of wildlife. Let them not look at wildlife as, as a problem. How do we get a good ground where people live with the wildlife, but they are benefiting? So the programs that we are working on include education. I talked about conservation schools, try to help communities identify by themselves agro-based enterprise, and then sometimes we provide them with seed capital for them to be able to start up the enterprises. And finally, ecotourism, still in the conservancy, but also those other areas that have potential for ecotourism. We are supporting that. Yeah, this is a pictorial of, is this a park or is it a privately owned land?
Park.
Yeah, you're right, it's a park. Anybody else? You're wrong. This is private land. This is land that's owned by an individual. But this is what I talk about. People are living with wildlife. This is an area in, this is Eric's home in Ankole, in Imboro. This land belongs to an individual, but they have zebra. You'll find in some parts in Kidepo, you'll take a picture and you find wildlife, but you also have buffalo. You find elephants and you just can't believe whether it's really land that belongs to an individual community or it is part. And this is what we are going through. Then you can, it will be very difficult to push the wildlife back into the parks, or it will also be very difficult to have all the livestock moved away. It's difficult. So somehow you have to get a middle ground. Yeah, I talked about the illegal alien trade. Uganda is a transit country. What are we working on? We have helped the government of Uganda set up a Canine for conservation, and we are stationed in Entebbe, which is the airport. We are also going to set up another Canine unit in northern Uganda to try to block the DRC route. Doesn't help to have it helps to have these people arrested, but then without a good judicial system, it also defeats the logic. So much as we are working on intercepting these individuals, we also want to build on work on with the judicial system to be able to build the capacity of the judiciary to be able to understand wildlife cases and how to assess evidence. That's it.
Okay, let's take some questions in the room first, and then we'll go to the folks online. And if you could just, before you ask a question, if you could just introduce yourself and where you come from, that'd be great. So, Nadia, who you have here? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Nate Spillman with the Society for Conservation Biology. Really great talk. Thank you very much. I just want to get your perspective. Like, you've come from, I think you mentioned the tea growing industry, and you worked in the forestry enterprise industry. How has that sort of shaped your approach and perspective to your work now in conservation?
Yeah, thank you very much. in my early years, my professional early years, I was in agronomy, still growing, and I'm talking about the conflict that we're talking about here is much more of human wildlife conflict is related to crops. So I think my having participated in helping farmers way back 20 years ago, 25 years ago, improving their income from agriculture, and then here you see that the agriculture that I was promoting, the other side people are suffering because of wildlife. I think it helps me appreciate where the farmers are coming from. And then the recent between AID and AWF, which is a private sector approaches. Oftentimes, when I'm working with my colleagues in Uganda and we are working with these communities, we are working with the parks. Sometimes you need to bring in the lens of private sector. You need to understand that farmer X has put in X amount of dollars. They are putting their labor, but then all that labor has been lost because of an elephant raid. So it's not only right to go and tell them, okay, fine, the crop that you've lost is worth $5, but then how about the time that they have invested in? So I think when I look at that background, it helps me also help in decision making, but also helps in listening with the people that we work with.
Any questions?
Yes, well, thank you so much for this very comprehensive view of Uganda. I've only landed in Entebbe, so I didn't raise my hand when you asked who has been there, because that doesn't count. A couple of questions. Jaime Cavalier from the Global Environment Facility, right? Two questions. One on compensation. If the government has thought of moving from a compensation scheme to an insurance scheme, which is different in and just want to sort of hear your views as to whether or not this shift is happening or has been discussed. The other one is on private-public partnerships with for in selected protected areas. I'll be interested in hearing what is that the private sector asks the government so they can actually step in. What are the conditions, basic requirements on the part of the private sector to consider investing in? Probably just set up lodges or engaging in tourism.
Yeah, so the first question is about the compensation versus insurance. We've not thought about that, and it's a good idea. Unfortunately, the act is already in place, so it might be very difficult for us to change. In Uganda, it takes a couple of years to be able to change an act of parliament. But I think this is the first time I'm hearing about insurance. Nobody has ever talked about it. The idea is, but it's interesting because right now everybody is scared, because these cases happen a lot, but even the cases that are happening, that have been happening, chances are high that when the scheme sets in, people will start making up cases. Like in Kenya, we hear somebody can wake up in the night, they slash their prop, and then they push in, say, some animals, and then the following day they are claiming that we've lost 5 acres of say corn, so it can be abused. Then the other is
Private sector.
The private sector. It's the first time we've done it. We've been on it for the last 1 year. We have 9 private sector entities that we are about to conclude. The government is providing land, of course, in the park, but the private sector, in some cases, not all cases, we've had private sector saying, we are bringing in $3-4 million investment, but can government provide the utilities? For example, can you pull power to the park? Can you pull water? Can you open up roads? We've had cases where they've asked that, but we've also had cases where they are just so anxious to come in and invest. Because it's long-term lease. 30 to 50 years, where you're getting free land. You just bring in money, and then you have this kind of benefit sharing agreement.
And maybe just to back up a little bit more, at the very beginning of the process, the private sector they said we need to know which one place to go because the regulatory environment was a little complicated. They didn't know who to talk to, and people were using that to ask for a little bit more. So the president actually stepped in and gave them a one-stop shop of where to go for these conversations, which I think helped accelerate how quickly they happened.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eric. And just to build on that is even before we came in, private sector was around. I mean, they were moving all over the place. They wanted to invest, but as he says, everybody who owns an office would say, "Well, we can help you, but you have to pay." And it was very complicated. And many of these guys pulled out of the country. I mean, they would come in, spend 2-3 weeks, and they just go back. But when we stepped in, the president put his foot down and said, "You know what, guys, if you can help, it has worked out."
Should we go online? I've got to get closer to read it. Can you read it, Eric? This is
Forests of the World.
Yeah, this is Meta, I think, from Forests of the World.
It's in quite a public place.
So she's asking, is any organization compiling possible concrete solutions to the human wildlife conflicts, such as chili growing and bees to ward off elephants? Have there been successful strategies, and do we have a database or reference?
We are doing some of our work on human wildlife conflict. We are working on the chili, using the chili and beehives.
Okay.
And as AWF, we document the successes. I don't know whether this person wants it to be put online. Yeah, but as AWF, yes, we are using chili as a human wildlife conflict crop and beekeeping. And it's been successful where we have worked in north of Machion and then south of Kidepo.
Are these very aggressive bees?
The beauty with these two enterprises is that it helps in 2 ways. One is that it's an income for the community, for the individuals involved, and then two, it works off elephants. So if you have somebody benefiting economically, but also both is economic, because even when the elephants don't get into their gardens, then they are able to maintain their agriculture.
Yeah, and it's not just AWF. I think Jane Goodall Institute has had quite a bit of success with bees as well.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's why we picked it up.
Yeah, actually, our first work on the bees was with JGI. We had this program that was funded by USAID, and we were in partnership with Jane Goodall Institute, and they started off that work in Budongo and Kalinzu, which is in western Uganda. At the end of the program, AWF also took up that innovation and started rolling it up in northern Uganda.
I see WCS is working on it.
Chris from WCS, we are working successfully in Kenya implementing bee fences to mitigate. Oh, I think he's responding to the other.
Yeah. Okay, and Dave McGowan has a question. Has the One Health concept played a role in your plans with One Health? That's coming from CI, I think. It's an integrated. I don't know if David's with CI. One Health is an integrated program which combines some global health aspects with biodiversity conservation. So
is this a part of the task group that AGI is in?
The JGI and CI work in freshwater washing conservation in South Africa and Uganda. Yeah. So JGI would be the implementing partner in Uganda.
Yeah, so under ABCG, there is a task group that's focused on that approach, and they work in South Africa and Western Uganda on integrated approaches.
Yeah. We can dig into that a little bit more. Let's see, Barbara Cousins of the, that's it.
Not too far away, is it Cassie Lily?
Yeah, that's it. Are the RZI KCC
That's this
project?
in
Yeah.
Chivali.
We advance conservation around Chivali through increased access to and equity in education and healthcare, given proximity of wildlife and livestock. Is AWF engaging on supporting One Health initiatives in Uganda?
No.
And then David beat me to the punch in asking the question. So I don't know if
Yeah, and part of why AWF hasn't is AWF and JGI have been partnered for quite a few years, working together on biodiversity projects, and so actually JGI has been AWF's lead in forests. We haven't tried to replace the capacity they already had, so it's been a part of the programming that Sudi's talking about, but it's been led by Jane Goodall.
Yeah. And David clarifies it links human, animal, and ecosystem health into One Health. Yeah, excellent. Okay. And Stasia Carrington from Zoterra. I was in Windy and saw how the farms are right up to the line of the park. As the gorilla population continues to grow, is there a plan to purchase farms to expand and reforest?
Are there plans to expand the park and reforest and Windy? What can you do that?
Well, there's talk actually with funding from USAID. I mean, if you remember, read about it. In 2008, I didn't talk about a lodge that we established in 2008 called Clouds. This again was a partnership between the private sector and the community. But part of that effort also included buying off some communities that were close to Windy, and that it's about half a kilometer in width and then runs for about 15 kilometers in length. So that area is a buffer zone. We bought it as AWF bought it. We funded from USAID, and the community is growing tea, which is also a buffer crop. So there's been a discussion, people coming to us asking the right authority whether they can be bought off in the area, since the families are increasing, the number of the families of the mountain gorillas is increasing, and therefore they are also moving out of the park. Yeah, but I've not. I don't think anything concrete has.
I mean, the other interesting thing under the Wildlife Act, and this was a little bit of what Sudi was talking about with the conservancies, is that for the first time it creates the opportunity for communities to actually get in the business of having conservation areas. So it's not buying land from communities, but it's working with communities to use their land as wildlife corridors and expanded space. And we're working on this north of Murchison, south and west of Kidepo, and west of Lincoln Borough. It's new for Uganda. They've actually never had a policy framework that would allow it. So it's early stages, but it's promising.
Has there been coordination with Kenya has the conservancies model that was officially legalized in 2013, but are you following a specific model, like whether it's Kenya, Namibia, or trying to work with established ones?
Our experience in Uganda is that every area is unique. Even within Uganda, we have 3 conservers that we have set up, but each of these, if you asked me, each of these is a different model. The approach we use to establish one in Southwest is completely different from the one we use in Mashonford, and completely different from the one in Kidepo. So our experience is that you're dealing with communities, and each community is unique. There are different challenges, there are different ways of looking at, at the world. So you cannot cut and paste.
And that was you can imagine the AWF being based in Kenya and having such a long history with the conservancies in Kenya. There was a tendency at first to do that, but a big part of the process we walked through with the Ugandan government was looking at all the models, right? Looking at Namibia, looking at Zimbabwe, looking at Kenya, and trying to create a framework that would work for the diversity of the communities there, because it's culturally quite diverse. So there are differences in how those community structures are actually going to work in real life.
Another question just came in from Ingrid, who is a student at the Clemson University and former employee of the Uganda Wildlife Authority. She's asking to please share more about oil mining plans in Murchison Falls National Park and what AWF and the Uganda government are working on to mitigate the impacts of the heavy mining activities, considering that this is the first time this is happening in Uganda, let alone in a protected area.
As AWF, we are not so much involved in helping government of Uganda mitigate impacts associated with oil exploration and then eventual production. But other institutions are working with government of Uganda. In the first place, a lot of documentation was done. The EIS were done for exploration, production, pipeline. And there's a lot of engagement between the Ministry of Environment, which is responsible for mitigating environmental impacts, and then Uganda Wildlife Authority and Ministry of Energy. So as AWF, we are not that involved in that part. The only way we are involved is when we work, for example, in Murchison and help Uganda Wildlife Authority on the science. When we help UWA in looking at how the wildlife is moving away from those areas, and then document that, and then tell them, incidentally, when you look at where zebras were living 10 years ago, but because of the movement of the vehicles and trucks, maybe the wildlife is moving. That information, that's the best we are doing. We are working on.
One of the requests we've had, and it's not something we could respond to, but it would be interesting for like the U.S. government to consider, is the Wildlife Authority asked for just technical cooperation, right? Uganda Wildlife Authority in Murchison has no experience dealing with oil. So just having someone come in and have them think through rapid response plans and risk mitigation strategies is something that they need help with. I don't know if anyone's actually providing that support, but I know it's needed.
Again, just based on my experience with USAID, we had a project where we provided an individual for 5 years, but that project ended together with our biodiversity project. That was 2017.
Yeah,
they run concurrently, but at the end of that project, USAID, in their wisdom, never provided that support again. Yeah, but there was somebody who was based in UWA and was guiding UWA on the rapid response decision making. I don't know. Maybe I need to find out. Maybe the Norwegians, because they were supporting environmental impacts associated with the wine.
Okay, so one last question, and I think we'll wrap up. This is from Michelle to add to Ingrid's question. What is the public perception in Uganda of oil development in Murchison?
It references the response to the dam.
Has there been
a similar response to oil that there was to the dam of Bujagali Falls?
Murchison Falls?
Has there been any sort of public opinion expressed about the oil and gas development?
I mean, it's actually when it all started about 10 years ago. At one point, we thought that probably it would not take off because there was a lot of resistance, But you cannot resist oil production in a country like Uganda. So I mean, there was a lot, and that's what created, starting the strategic environmental impact assessments, bring in international experts, guys who understand this industry. Actually, government also brought in guys from Texas, if I remember well, Texas. I think they are very good in wide. Because as a result of that, the noise is crude, but as a result of that, shouting.
Okay.
I mean, it has now faded down.
All right, well, with that, I'd like to say thank you once again. And, the webinar recording and the presentation will be up online in about a week, and then an email will go out to everybody who's registered. So those in box. Thanks, everyone, for joining. See you next time.